Afternoon. I know it's a busy day of juggling of schedules, and we have several members that are going to be in and out. They had some committee meetings and bills they were responsible for to be presented as well. So we will kind of have a little bit of traffic in and out probably at times. And I know that y'all know, but we have some new people that are here. There are a lot of familiar faces. If you are speaking to something and then you feel like you need to leave, that's fine. Don't feel like you have to stay the whole time if we have addressed your concern. I want to tell you what, we have much to celebrate because we have about 35 people that have signed up for these two hearings. That means there are a lot of great advocates here in the room today, and I thank y'all for that. I'm going to ask that you be brief, and if you need to leave anything with us or give us more information, that certainly is great. We are going to be moving fairly quickly. I think some of you, if not all of you, may have seen the deadlines that have been set in place to try to move the House very quickly so that the Senate can have the budget and we can try to get everybody finished to go have a really nice Easter or spring vacation with their family, hopefully, and that includes all of you as well, because I know so many of you are here every day that we are and even days that we're not. So with that in mind, I want you to know we're going to be working. This committee will be working pretty hard over the next couple of days, just like all of the House subcommittees will be, to meet the deadlines and try to make sure that we're not the ones that cause any delays in that schedule, if at all possible. I do thank each of you. I know how much you care, and some of the great work that each of you do is profoundly important throughout our state. So I want to hear your messages. I want to know what you see as some needs and some places where you think Georgia should invest. So we will get started here. I'm going to warn you, like I said, there are about 35 people. So we're going to start out with a goal of trying to say 3 minutes. I know that's hard, and for some of you, we may get way off the charts on that, but we do have a sheet. Roma, if you want to show them, we're going to do this, and I'm so sorry to do that. I'm so glad y'all find it humorous. I'm so sorry to do it. We'll try with great respect. If you're making a point and there's something that you feel you haven't said, let's make sure we get it in. But we'll do as much as we can to hear from everyone today and make sure that we are well informed. So we'll start off, and our first speaker is going to be Connie Lee. If you would come to the podium, if that's possible. We'll make sure that microphone's on.
It's on.
Great.
Dear Honorable Chairwoman Dempsey, my name is Connie Lee, and I want to talk with you about the need for more waiver for people with developmental disability in Georgia. On November the 30th, 2011, my wife, Mary, and I met Mr. Fraser Smith after hearing his story. Please allow me to share it with you. Mr. Fraser was born in Everton, Georgia in 1934. He came from a big family, the youngest one of 8. There were 4 boys and 4 girls. They grew up in a farm and attended an all-black school in 1939 called Benny Grove School. Mr. Fraser went to school through the 3rd grade until his parents were told that he didn't learn as fast as the rest. So his parents kept him home. Mr. Fraser learned the farm life, tending the crops and taking care of the animals was the rhythm of his day. Then he found pleasure in running through the fields, inhaling the fresh air. One day, while running through the field, he ran off. His parents were concerned and took him to the doctor, who advised them to admit him to Central State Hospital in Milledgeville in 1949. Mr. Fraser lived there for 22 years, then later moved to a nursing facility in Macon, Georgia in 1972, where he still lives today. For over 65 years, Mr. Fraser had been institutionalized, living far away from family and friends. His life has been a lonely one with no family faces and no one he could trust. So he settled into what was realized that he was confined to the walls of a facility in which he lived. He became afraid of the world he left behind and decided his heart and decided in his heart that he would never leave the nursing facility. The good news is when I became a citizen advocate, I began to understand the rejection and isolation Mr. Fraser experienced. During these years, I realized how important it was for me to build a relationship of trust. Once trust was developed, Mr. Fraser walked out those doors of the nursing home facility into my home for visits. Mr. Fraser had become an honorable member in our family, and on his behalf, I want to request that he be awarded a Medicaid waiver to address his most pressing needs. The benefits of Mr. Fraser will gain from the waiver cannot be justified on paper, but I can tell you that the waiver will offer him a real home in a private, safe, and secure, and a home that reflects his sincere identity. Mr. Fraser will have freedom of choice and make his own decision, and he will not be surrounded by paid staff. He will be able to welcome friends and neighbors to his home. He will set his own schedule with goals and of his interest to him. He will receive better care outside of the facility. Many people believe that he received 24 hours of care while in the nursing facility, but that is not the case. With a Medicaid waiver, he will no longer be a nursing facility client or a folder member or a chart. The waiver will support him to be a true member of our community. Currently, Mr. Fraser sat by the window at the nursing home facility until someone come to visit him, or he is presented with something else. He is not clean, he is not bathed often, and he is not shaved. I am constantly providing protection and advocacy for him. He deserves so much more. I apply for a waiver for Mr. Fraser that he can move into a real home in the community. For the first time in 6 decades, he and other Georgians deserve to have the good things in life outside of a facility. He's waited 66 years. I beg of you and respectfully request that you support the unlock the waiver list we requested for funds. 1,000 more new comp waiver for Georgians most in need for $16,493,000. Mr. Fraser and others are waiting. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay. If not, thank you so much. Appreciate you
Yes, ma'am.
being here to share that story. We will, next up is Elizabeth Apley, and I will tell you that Duane Hathaway, I'm not sure which one it is, will be next after this. Judith Moore with you. Okay, great. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Madam Chair and committee members, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to testify to you today. I'm Judith Moen Stanley, Chair of All About Developmental Disabilities, or AADD. I'm also the mother of a young man who has a developmental disability. He is studying at Kennesaw State University's Academy for Social Inclusion and working on developing better social skills and some career skills. And I come here today not only representing him, but all young adults with developmental disabilities that need supported employment services. My son said to me about 2 weeks ago when he came home, "Mom, I just want to get a job. I want to work. Our mission at AADD is to support options for a meaningful life for individuals with developmental disabilities. We have many clients, and we provide supported employment for them, and that's very important so that they can work and participate in many capacities in our communities. I want to tell you the story about Casey. Casey had a good high school experience. She graduated. She went home and sat at home in isolation for 10 years. During that period of time, she lost her social skills. She lost very many things that connected her to her community. When she came to us, we were able to help her find some volunteer activities so that she could become socially engaged again. And then we were able to help her find a paying job at Panera Bread Company. Today, she lives in a community services setting, and thanks to the services provided by supported employment, she has work that provides meaning in her life, connection to her community, and a paycheck. I urge you to support our request for $1.96 million in the FY16 Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities budget for adult developmental disability services. This money is desperately needed to support 250 young adults so that they can work. These young adults are transitioning out of high school. We want to avoid the stories that Casey had to experience and so many other young people who are graduating. There are 1,300 young people graduating from high school. They do well in high school. They graduate from high school in the state of Georgia, 1,300 every year. And they graduate to what I say, they graduate to the couch. They graduate to television. They graduate to video games. And they lose their social skill, and so much is being lost. I just want to thank you so much for your support of $392,000 in the FY 2015 budget to serve. We already are serving 60 young adults from, I believe it's 10 regions in the state, so that we can kind of impact these 1,300 young adults that are coming out of our high schools. At present, when these young adults graduate, they are sent home, and they often have to wait on the waiver waiting list for up to 9 years. Right now, you know, we have 7,341 people on it, and last year only 400 waivers were granted. I have to tell you quickly that if you invest $1 in supported employment, studies show you get $1.60 return. This is the right thing to do for the state of Georgia. It's the right thing for humanitarian reasons, it's the right thing for spiritual reasons, and it's the right thing for economic reasons. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Duane Hathaway, and after that, Michael Cleese, yeah, okay, good. Not my writing, so I apologize if I mess up anybody's name right up front, okay?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for letting me speak to you today. I'm Duane Hathaway, the Executive Director for Georgia CASA. Georgia CASA is an organization that advocates for the best interests of abused and neglected children. We have, and we are represented in 143 counties in Georgia, probably 2,700 plus, counting volunteer staff and board members. I'm actually carrying two torches today. The first thing I want to talk to you about is just the governor's budget for the child welfare reform, or DFAC's budget. And on behalf of the CASA network, we just want to urge you to, in overwhelming fashion, to support that. And I'm not the first to say this, but I think that we all recognize that DFACS for years has been unfunded, under-resourced, underappreciated, and overwhelmed. So this is really a lot of good things in this budget for DFACS. It's a long time coming. I think there are a lot of people in this room that have been recommending some of these things for many years, and so it's a good start now to fund this department in a way that needs to be funded. So we really support that and urge you for strong consideration in passing those items that the governor has put in for the DFACS budget. On the other hand, CASA is an organization that adds value to the child welfare system. We have, and we appreciate the support the legislators given us over the years, especially the support of last year's for the 15 budget and the recent amended budget, and we appreciate that very much. That's the first increase we've had since 2008, and since 2008 we have gone from 120 counties to 143 counties. We've gone from 6 programs of those 47 affiliates serving 100% of the children in their jurisdiction to 13 programs serving 100% of the children in their jurisdiction. So we're asking you today to consider increasing our funding level from $2 million to $2.5 million for the FY16 budget. We're serving 60% of the children. We have some capacity issues, especially in the urban settings. Fulton, DeKalb, where a large number of the children are. So we really appreciate the consideration for that. The investment represents 25 cents on the dollar. So for the $2 million we're receiving now, we'll raise an additional $7 million for a total network budget throughout the state of $9 million. So I just urge you to consider that when you're looking at child welfare system. We know that the department needs resources, and we fully support that. If you look at a child welfare system and you want to rate it, and I'm not making a value judgment here, I'm just making a hypothetical. If you rate it from 1 to 10, if say it's a 10, and then you add costs, you got 10 plus. So I just urge you to consider that as we look forward to improving our child welfare system in Georgia. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you. And I want you to know that one reason there are not questions probably is because we are all pretty well prepped already on some of the issues because so many of you have already spoken with us. So please don't think that. I don't want you to feel so rushed that we are not interested. Please know that. Okay, next I believe is Michael Cleese with Grady.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Clays. I'm the Executive Director of the Behavioral Health Services at Grady. If you live in Fulton County and you need hospitalization due to severe and persistent mental illness, you have 8 beds at your disposal to go into. Grady, as you might know, is one of the largest mental health providers in the state of Georgia, behind the state jail, behind the city jail, which we also provide services in the city jail. Unfortunately, the need in Fulton County and DeKalb counties continue to grow despite Grady's significant investments. Some examples of those investments have been a crisis intervention services that we operate within the hospital to pull individuals as quickly as we can off of the emergency room floor. We do staff the emergency room with 24/7 clinicians that are largely unfunded. And we are about to, as you see the big hole right outside of the hospital, Grady's investing in a significant expansion of the emergency room, and we'll have dedicated space for behavioral health services there, but the staff within that will not be funded. Grady is seeking today to increase its dedicated beds for the uninsured from 8 beds to 16 beds at a cost of $1.9 million. We feel that that expansion of capacity for the uninsured will help defer the amount of people that go to Georgia Regional Hospital every year. In fact, out of 800 people a month that come into the Grady emergency room, today we're sending about 25 of those people to the state hospital. We feel like we can decrease that volume significantly by being able to treat individuals locally, which also lines up with the Department of Behavioral Health goals and objectives to provide local services for those individuals. 8 beds, that's all we've got if you're uninsured in Fulton County. Questions?
Any questions from the committee? Representative Oliver?
I know that there's been a good study committee going on this past summer with Representative Gardner, and in that you don't have a CSB, I just don't understand how the crisis programs are coordinated in Fulton County. If you get that many more beds, is it going to increase the coordination with the other monies that are going out to individual providers?
Sure. So I think the inundation, almost the tsunami of individuals that come to the Grady Emergency Room, 800 a month, is a product of a weak infrastructure in terms of outpatient services. So there's no doubt there's cause and effect there. You've got to solve that part, which is a much bigger and longer term problem to solve than the fact that we have individuals sitting in chairs for 3 or 4 days waiting for an inpatient bed. That's the acute problem that we're trying to solve at Grady. But both problems exist indeed.
Representative Henson.
Thank you. You're talking about 8 beds. DeKalb's got 36. Is that our CSB beds?
That's correct. DeKalb's beds are CSB beds operated by the CSB. And I understand that the DBHDD also added some beds in Gwinnett County as well. But state-funded beds in Fulton County at this point in time is 8.
Does Atlanta have anything?
The city jail or Georgia Regional. Those are your 3 options if you're uninsured.
Your population slightly greater than DeKalb County, and we're at 700,000.
There's 900,000 for Fulton County. And the prevalence of mental illness, is about 5% of that population, so it's significant.
I'm not supposed to say anything because it probably won't be very nice about how underfunded. And it's not your fault. We need to do better.
Thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment. There is concern about the coordination of services in Fulton County. So a piece of the report that came out of the Fulton County delegation not only recommends that additional beds be funded at Grady for crisis services, since we're paying for it, but the state is not paying what we consider to be its fair share. The other piece of the recommendation is to work with the Department of Behavioral Health and Fulton County to create something like a CSB that will begin the coordination of both the state, county, and other dollars that are spent in Fulton County for mental health. So while it is a crisis, there is also a plan for better coordination. You know that the value options is in all the other parts of the state is working with the CSB to coordinate the services in that CSB area. But since Fulton County is not part of a CSB, we kind of we're in the position of being left out of the state funding and left out of the opportunity for coordination. But we have gotten the county commissioners and the department to sit down together and look at all the funding that goes into Fulton County, both state, federal, local, and so on, to create a system that will be, we hope, a better coordinated system of care. It's desperately needed, and to keep Grady involved in treating mental health care, we just feel like the state needs to show that they are willing to help the number of people in Fulton County who show up with mental illness get the care that they need. So I'd appreciate very much your consideration of this request.
Thank you.
I don't see any further questions. Thank you. Thank you. Ellen Jaeger. And after that, Wendy Clifton.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ellen Jaeger. I'm with Mental Health America of Georgia. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, and I've been talking to you about mental health for about 20 years now, long time. I want to thank you for the money you've invested in adult mental health. We know that the Department of Justice settlement really brought a lot of additional services to the state. Unfortunately, it did not deal with children's mental health. 1 in 4 children are diagnosed in any given year with a mental illness. From the first time you see a symptom till the time they receive a service is approximately 10 years. I cannot think of any other illness where you would say that, or you could say that. If you look at the budget document on page 113, I believe it's 113, you'll see that there are 4 services for kids. All of these services are what we consider deep-end services. None of the money is being put toward intervention and prevention. Without early intervention and prevention, nothing will change. The state will continuously pay for the deep-end services, and these kids will grow up to be adults who need deep-end services. So we are asking you to look at early intervention and prevention, and there are a couple of programs that you can look at. There used to be, a long time ago, a time when working with the CSBs, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities contracted to have counselors in the schools, clinicians to provide services for kids. This was very beneficial, but the funding went away. There is a program called Mental Health First Aid for Youth. This is a wonderful program. For about $100,000, you would train around 1,200 people. That's about $85 a person. This would go a long way in talking about what is mental health for young people, what does it look like, what can you do. Our suicide rate in the state is growing rapidly, and thank you, Chairman Dempsey, for your wonderful bill. It addresses the problem, but it doesn't complete the problem. We need to have a better understanding of what's happening with kids and why, in fact, so many kids are taking or attempting to take their life. I've got some information for you. I'm going to leave with you. The information is about early intervention and prevention. I really urge you to look at that. Nothing, absolutely nothing will change if we don't get to these kids early on. I also have a book that I'll leave with you on mental health first aid for youth, so you can see what the program is and what it talks about. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a question. I know at least one here. Representative Howard.
Right, thank you. Did I hear you say that there's zero funds being put into intervention or early prevention?
There's approximately $62 million in the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities for children's mental health. But the services, that money, is going toward the deep-end services or kids who have clearly progressed in their illness.
Severe cases.
Right. These are kids with persistent mental illness.
Has anyone done any research on how maybe mental illness or behavioral issues has impacted the suspension rate of kids across the state?
Well, we know the dropout rate in high school is very high, and the majority of these kids are kids with mental illness. And when they don't graduate from high school, it's very difficult to get a decent job, as you know. Mm-hmm. These kids usually end up on the streets, in DJJ, in other places where the state spends money, just not productively.
So are you proposing any type of plan to implement something there, or is there a plan in place to make services more available to the children and maybe kindergarten on up? Has anyone put an implementation plan in place?
There is work that's being done also with the Department of Education, but we think the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities needs to be not just a partner, but a key player in these services, because this is really where mental health is housed. Mm-hmm. We know that kids 5, 6 are talking about suicide, so we know kindergarten is the appropriate age. Mm-hmm. We do have programs that we'd be happy to talk about, but right now there is no one particular program that really looks at early intervention and prevention.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that's all the questions. Thank you so much, and thanks for bringing some materials to share with us. That'll be great. We can pass them down to everybody. Wendy Clifton, and after Ms. Clifton will be Keith Powell.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And actually, I'm here impersonating Melissa Carter, who is the director of the Barton Child Law and Policy Center at Emory Law School. And I say that with all due respect to her, but I'm kidding, of course. She had a lovely, beautiful 3-month-old baby back in November and is on maternity leave. But also, she served on the Child Welfare Reform Council as one of the appointees. And we just felt like at the Barton Center that it's been such an incredible year and good conversation for the last 3 or 4 years around the issue of child welfare and juvenile justice that we wanted to come today specifically offer our support and appreciation to the governor for his leadership on those 2 issues. But the budget before you and the DHS budget, and I'm looking at a tracking document, I think it's the House tracking document, but it's specifically line items 27.6.4 through 27.6.11 are the specific ones in the budget. It's a total, if I'm not mistaken, of a little more than $28 million towards the child welfare improvements that the council recommended. And they include everything from increasing number of caseworkers to training to mentor services to, I'm just looking at the list here in front of me right now, career ladders for caseworkers and supervisors, funds to implement supervisor mentor pilot programs, and et cetera. Many things that I think under the new leadership of DFACS Director Bobby Cagle will bring about a tremendous amount of improvement in that state agency that we all want to see, but that he can't do it by himself. He has to have a workforce that is dedicated to and trained properly for the work that they're put out there to do every day. And so just wanted to ask for your due consideration of that, and again, appreciate the effort of the governor as well as the whole council that Melissa participated on last year, and we look forward to working with you on these budget recommendations and are happy to answer any questions that you may have along in the process about any of those line items.
Are there any questions from the committee? No, thank you. Very good. So next is Keith Powell and then Priscilla McKeeva.
Chairman Keith Powell couldn't make it because of the weather, but we have other people that will speak. So
Okay. Okay.
sorry.
Do you want?
Let us know.
Oh, others down the list? Is that what
We've
you're
got
saying?
others first.
Okay. 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 Priscilla McKeeva. Wait. You want me to wait just a little bit? Right. Okay. What about Kate Papazoglu? Great.
Honorable Chairwoman Dempsey and committee members, good afternoon. My name is Kate Papazoglu, and I'm the single mother of Evie, who has autism and Williams syndrome, which is a rare condition associated with very low intelligence and very strong musical abilities. Evie is 37, but requires many of the same supports on a daily basis as children who are 5 to 7 years old, such as with bathing or crossing the road. My career as a nurse educator ended the day she was born, as her needs were too great to allow me the opportunity to work. Evie and I are new to Georgia, having moved here 1 year ago. We previously lived in West Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Massachusetts. During this time, Evie was consistently provided with state-funded services. The services that she received in these states were critical in teaching her so many skills that have contributed to her and my quality of life, including reading, writing, and toilet training. Every milestone has been hard work, but we've celebrated each and every one of them. We lived in Massachusetts for 30 years, and here the wave of funding Evie received gave her the opportunity to truly be a part of her community through 2 part-time paid jobs, which she held for 10 years, and through social events with her peers. When we decided to move to Georgia to be closer to my younger daughter, who works with children with neurological conditions at CHOA, everyone advised me against the move. I was repeatedly told that I would languish on a waiting list for years, and that the services Evie had received elsewhere were simply not available. Here in Georgia, I have been fortunate enough to be able to privately pay for some wonderful supports, but as a single mother, this is not easy. Evie has been on the short-term planning list for the last year, and DBHDD seems to have little optimism for her receiving a waiver at any time in the near future. In the last year, the only state funding I've received is $3,000 through All About Developmental Disabilities. Raising a child with a disability, or indeed continuing to raise an adult child with a disability, can bring great joy, but is also tremendously difficult. Limited financial supports place an additional and unnecessary burden on families. In closing, I would like to ask you for your support of the Unlock the Waiting List request to fund 1,000 new now comp waiver slots at $16,493,000 so that families like mine can have a much-needed lifeline. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Appreciate it. And next, I believe, is Betty Sass, maybe? Great.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Beata Sass, and I am an Atlanta-based photographer and the mother of 2 children. My daughter, who is 23 years old, Christine, is living with cerebral palsy and autism. As a mother to Christine, I am acutely aware of the unique challenges that parents face in raising a child with a developmental disability, and that is what inspired me to launch my project, Real Stories, Real People. The mission of my project is to inform the public and build support for funding to enable persons with developmental disabilities to lead meaningful and productive lives. Now, because part of my project involves educating the public, I have provided information about developmental disabilities in your packet, which you can look at a later date. My project, Real Stories, Real People, is a collection of photo essays. They portray lives well lived as a result of funding with a Medicaid waiver, as well as lives lacking meaning as a result of inadequate funding. The first person I want to introduce you to is John. John is 22 years old, and he transitioned out of high school in October of 2014 with no viable plan or funding for services. John lives with his parents, and both his parents work full-time. His mother was very concerned that she was going to have to quit her job to take care of John. Luckily, shortly after I completed his story, he was awarded a comp waiver, but he is still waiting for funds for services. John requires total assistance. In addition, his parents are caring for an 86-year-old mother who is suffering from late-stage Alzheimer's disease. The only respite this family gets is when a neighbor comes over a couple afternoons a week to provide companionship for John and his grandmother. I mention this because when you provide an individual with a Medicaid waiver, it affects the integrity and health of the entire family unit. This is what John and Rebecca, John's parents, have to say. We are both approaching our 60s. We've cared for John at home for 22 years and are committed to doing so for as long as we are physically able. A Medicaid waiver would give John the opportunity to thrive as best he can outside of the home and give us some much-needed relief, especially as we age and cannot physically care for him. We're not asking for a waiver to make our life happier or more comfortable, just more bearable. The next person I want to introduce you to is Mona. Mona is 73 years old, and she's on the waiting list for a Medicaid waiver. Mona has been living with her 78-year-old brother, Claude, and her sister-in-law, Nancy, since 1995. This is what Claude has to say. Our stress level is increasing because of the responsibility of taking care of Mona. Both Nancy and I are in therapy for stress and depression. In Georgia, there are over 21,000 people with a developmental disability living with caregivers over the age of 60. This is what Claude and Nancy have to say. Our responsibility to care for Mona has reached a critical stage. Nancy and I want to get Mona secured in an appropriate residential setting in the community while we still have control of the process and before our health has been evenly more seriously compromised. Leaving these decisions to people who don't know Mona and her needs for caring support would be irresponsible at best. There is an economic impact in the absence of funding, and this can be demonstrated in Mary and Michael's story. Mary is a single mom, and she has been caring for Michael for 30 years. They live off Michael's Social Security check and receive SNAP benefits. Michael has been on the waiting list for 5 years. This is what Mary has to say. People are always asking me, don't you want to get a job? They don't understand. Taking care of Michael is a full-time job. I don't have nobody to help me. I can't leave Michael alone because he could run off. I have to take him everywhere I go. Now, I know I presented stories of struggles, but on my website I also have stories of people who are doing remarkably well as a result of funding. Please support the Unlock the Waiting List ask. Please support funding of $16,493,000 for 100 more now comp waivers in the fiscal year 2016. Please feel free to contact me with any information that you may, or questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Now, I have a question because I want to say your name right. Beata.
Beata.
Beata. See, I can't get it. I'm so sorry. Thank you for sharing these beautiful stories and
Thank
for your
you.
work.
Thank you so much for your time.
Next up is Nancy Paris with Georgia Corps. Is Nancy here? Okay, well, we'll try to come back in case she's been detained. I know this is a tricky day with other meetings as well as the weather. Vicky Johnson, of course, Miss Vicky. And then after Miss Johnson will be Ginny Helms.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee members. I am Vicky Johnson, and I am an appointed volunteer member of the Georgia Council on Aging, for which I serve this year as legislative chair. The Georgia Council on Aging has been authorized to serve as an advisory agency to state government, and we come here today in that capacity to speak to the need for home and community-based services for elders. We are requesting an additional $10 million in fiscal year 2016 for funding for home and community-based services. And we are also endorsing the governor's request for $333,000 for staffing additions for adult protective services. Currently, there are over 13,200 eligible seniors on a statewide waiting list to receive services in their homes and communities. It costs the state far less to provide these services directly to these seniors where they are than to pay the state share should these at-risk seniors go to a long-term care facility and begin qualifying for Medicaid services. The average annual cost to the state for home and community-based services is $1,884 per person, versus a state cost of $13,200 for the state's Medicaid share of the nursing home bed. Currently, looking at this waiting list of over 13,000 people, 82% of them already qualify to receive nursing home services. And in fiscal year 2014, 470 seniors ended up going to a nursing home because they were languishing on the waiting list. Based on this waiting list and on the population growth projections for Georgia, we see a need for $50 million more in home and community-based service funding. This year we're asking for $10 million, and that could move approximately 5,000 seniors off this waiting list. Our recommendation to your committee then is to help end the wait for Georgia's vulnerable seniors. Cost-effective services delivered in homes and communities dramatically improve the lives of these seniors and their families while at the same time strengthening our local economies through support for public-private partnerships. And I would be happy to take questions.
Okay, I do see one. Chairman Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your comments today. Once people get the services, how long do those services keep them out of a nursing home?
Current records indicate that on the average, these home and community-based services can keep seniors in their homes for over 4 years at 50 months.
So that's roughly $52,000 for the 4 years.
At least, yes.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, and thank you for this great handout. You've done a good job of putting the facts together for us.
Thank you.
Ginny Helms, and then we'll have Ron Scroggie.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Ginny Helms with the Alzheimer's Association, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. In Georgia, we estimate that there are about 130,000 people living with Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, and there are about 500,000 caregivers. We also estimate that as much as 50% of those living with Alzheimer's have not yet been diagnosed. And it's because of this that we're very grateful for the leadership that was behind the passage of legislation in 2013 for the development of a task force to address Alzheimer's disease. That task force did an incredible job, and Chairman Benton was one of the 5 task force members. And by December of that year, the task force came up with a plan for addressing Alzheimer's to help increase awareness of the need for early detection and in order to have services for people. And since that time, the plan was presented last week. That was the update of all of the accomplishments of the task force, and it's pretty incredible what has been accomplished in the past year. Different organizations, Emory University, the Rosalind Carter Institute, the Alzheimer's Association, and many other organizations have come together to address the issues and leverage all of their resources to address the situation. Great things are happening. Just a few minutes ago, before I came here, I was at Emory where I was discussing with Dr. Monica Parker efforts to train nurses and others to be able to do early detection in congregations across Georgia. Some very exciting things are happening that I think are wonderful. We've heard, however, that in some states the Alzheimer's state plan sits on a shelf, and we don't want to see that happen here. We really want to see it move forward. We want to see all of the efforts leveraged and all of these different organizations work hard to address these issues that we know are bigger than a state budget. But we truly need someone to take this and to take the lead on it. The task force has done a great job of leading these efforts, but the advisory council that's come out of the task force has recommended that we have a full-time coordinator to address this issue full-time. And so we're asking for new funding in the amount of $107,000 that will pay the salary, the benefit, computers, travel expenses, all of the other expenses associated with this position. I think that if this position is funded, we will continue to see even greater things come out of the Alzheimer's state plan, and I think it's something that we'll all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you so much. Ron Scroggie and then Stan Jones.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak with you all. My name is Ron Scroggie, and I have worked the last 37 years in Georgia in various child welfare positions, 20 some of those running a program called Inner Harbor. For a little while, you might have read my name in the newspaper when I was state director of DFACS. And so today I come to you as a director of Together Georgia. We're a trade association that represents the private sector that serves children and families in the state of Georgia. Currently we have over 150 programs represented in our membership, 70 private agencies. Currently today there are 94 child caring institutions or group home type programs that are contracted by DFACS and 42 private child placement agencies or foster home placement agencies in Georgia. Our members are all licensed, they're all accountable, they're all graded quarterly by the state of Georgia on how they're doing. They also are being asked to do more. As you may know, last year we went from 7,500 children in out-of-home care and DFACs to over 2,000 children, over 10,000 children in out-of-home care. I want to just stand here before you today and want to echo what you've heard from Duane and Wendy. We, the private sector, totally and wholeheartedly support the Governor's Council recommendations on the increases in DFACs as far as more staff and IT improvements. I can tell you I'm very envious of those, having asked for much of that myself when I was State Director of DFACs, and wish Bobby all the best with getting those additional enhancements. But I'll let you know that we are part of the tapestry of child welfare in Georgia. Most of the children that are placed in out-of-home placements are served by the private sector. And over the last decade, there's only been a 3% rate increase for private providers, which means that many providers have to raise well over 25% of the cost of Georgia care for those children that are being placed in private agencies. So we are, and I've shared with you on a paper I've given you some of the other southern states, one rate that's comparison as far as basic foster care, how we would compare to some of those other states in Georgia. I also listed that Casey recently in 2012 did a study and showed that Georgia's costs cover about what Georgia reimburses providers to cover care for foster children is roughly 67% of the actual cost of care for those providers. So what we're asking for your consideration on as part of the investment in child welfare in the state of Georgia today is a 3% increase for the rates that are paid to private providers, which would be roughly $6,981,000. I'm very appreciative of any consideration you give to that.
Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you, though, for your
Thank you,
fact
Chairman
sheet.
Dempsey.
It will help us a great deal. Appreciate it. So Stan Jones and then Kim, I believe it says Littleton, will be next. Is Stan here? He was. We'll come back to him. Let's do Kim Littleton and then Melanie MacNeil. And if Kim's not here, Melanie, we'll go right to you.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Melanie MacNeil. I'm the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. And the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program is a program authorized by federal and state law to resolve problems and advocate on behalf of residents of long-term care facilities. There are approximately 50 50 local long-term care ombudsmen and 13 local programs that work on behalf of the approximately 70,000 residents of long-term care facilities, including 369 nursing homes, 1,791 personal care homes, 721 community living arrangements, and 4 intermediate care facilities. And the program areas cover between 3,000 and 8,000 square miles. So it's a lot of territory to cover. Ombudsmen are to visit the facilities, nursing homes and personal care homes, at least quarterly. So there's a lot of work that the ombudsmen do every day. We have approximately 80 volunteers that help the program, especially with the routine visits. The request today is for some additional funding for the ombudsman program. So $750,000 would allow for about $550,000 to go out to the local programs to improve their salaries, to help cover their costs. Gas has gone up, and so those kinds of expenses, technology, cell phones, especially if they're in very remote areas, are important. And for a lot of ombudsmen, they use their own cell phones. So some funding that would help to support them in that. We also are going from, and I know this is going to sound like we're in the dinosaur age, but right now casework is pen and paper. So we'd like to be able to get technology so that ombudsman could be out in the field and use a tablet or some other device to be able to do their work, make them more efficient, better able to, they would be able to spend more time actually in facilities working with the residents if they had less paperwork to do. And we think that having technology would make them more efficient in that way. And we're also asking for some funding that would provide support for a state-level volunteer coordinator. What we hear from some programs is they just don't have the time. We know that volunteers really extend the reach of the Ombudsman program, but it's hard to do all of that work and do your pen and paper work and try and recruit and retain and train volunteers. So we're asking for $750,000. And I do want to share just one story. This is what ombudsmen do. An ombudsman got a call that there was a mishap in a nursing home. There was a malfunction of the electric wheelchair, and as it happened, it was the administrator who was trying to help a resident with the electric wheelchair, and it ran over his foot. So the director of nursing decided that, well, because that happened, no one in the facility could use their electric wheelchair any longer. She was going to take them all away. So the ombudsman got on the phone with the director of nursing and said, you can't do that. You know, the law provides that you're supposed to promote mobility as much as you can. And so the good news is she relented, because as it turned out, it was the administrator who caused the problem anyway. But that's the kind of thing that ombudsmen do every day. So I would appreciate your support for additional funding for the program. Thank you.
Thank you. I do see one question. Chairman Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under your budget request, $50,000 for fund technology, what are you looking at for price of computers, and how much do you think that would cost?
For the tablets alone, and we did look into tablets, they range between $400 and $500. So just for tablets, it's about $32,000. The way it works for the Ombudsman program, the funding would come to the state office. It goes out to the local programs. So at the state level, we don't pay tax, but the local programs do. So $32,000 would cover the cost of the tablet, the protective accessory thing, and whatever tax. So about $32,000 would cover the tablets. In addition, as I say, some programs, the ombudsman use their own cell phones because they don't have the budget for the agency to provide phones for them. And some of those remote areas, it really is part of their safety to have a cell phone. So that's another reason for a little bit additional funding for technology.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much for the
Thank
work you do. Appreciate it. So next is Kahn. And after that, Mike Angstadt. Mike.
Good afternoon. My name is Zach Kahn, and I'm here representing Families First. Families First is Georgia's largest nonprofit agency that focuses solely on family social services. This year is our 125th year, so we're excited for things to come. I'm going to keep it pretty brief because I'm here to say a lot of what other people have said already, which I guess is what I get for signing up next to last. But really, we just wanted to express our support for the funding items for DFACs that were considered by the Council on Child Welfare Reform. I and other colleagues of mine attended that this summer, and we're really excited to see those line item budgets. And we really want to express support, particularly for employing additional DFACs caseworkers. A grievance that we heard over and over again this summer at the council meetings were that a lot of the caseworkers feel like they're overburdened, and we really want to support the governor's idea to lessen the burden on caseworkers so that we can hire more staff members and you can focus solely on the cases you have. We're also really excited to see that there's funds allocated for increasing mobile technology for caseworkers at DFACs. I know that a lot of people at the council express concern that sometimes caseworkers are put in precarious positions where they feel like they need a direct path of communication to local authorities. So working with Georgia Tech has suggested to provide mobile technologies to get in contact with local authorities, I think would be very helpful to caseworkers at DFACs. Also, we really endorse the plan to implement a career ladder and mentorship programs at DFACs. At the council meetings, it was brought up many times that a reason for the high turnover rate among caseworkers at DFACs is that they didn't perceive that there was kind of an upward trajectory as far as career path and a mentorship program. So we think implementing those things and using funds for that would be really helpful. So overall, we just wanted to come here today to express support for the funding items for DFACs that were specifically recommended by the Child Welfare Reform Council. Thank you.
I don't see any questions. Are there any? Well, thank you, and thank you for your support of that great body of work. Okay, next, Mike. And then after that, it will be Emily Acker.
Madam Chairman and committee members, thank you for this opportunity. I Executive Director of Twin Cedars Youth and Family Services, a private not-for-profit in LaGrange, Columbus, and Macon. I'm also board chair of MAC, the Multi-Agency Alliance for Children, and a past president of Together Georgia. Our agency is a 501c3 that provides many, many different services for most in need children in the child welfare system. One of the services is residential care. Last night we had 185 kids that we took care of in these 3 communities. As you heard from Ron Scroggie, our funding is not at the cost of what it takes us to provide for that care. We need to raise, at our agency, we raise about $2 million a year to make ends meet. That $2 million is often used for a TANF match, and we allow that to be used in the match that the state can use to pull down TANF funds from the federal government. Because our kids are so much in need, we also have to provide schooling for them. Many of them are not permitted to go to public school. In Macon alone, we'll be raising $1.8 million this year to build a school for our kids to attend. The other area that we need to raise funds for is for their mental health needs. So there's 3 services we provide: room, board, and watchful oversight, education, and mental health. None of these are a sustainable business model, and we do ask your consideration of a 3% increase only in our room, board, and watchful oversight rate, which would work out to be about $6.9 million. Thanks for your consideration, and I'd be happy to take any questions that y'all might have.
Are there any questions? Punch your button. Representative Howard.
Can you describe the kind of kids you have in your program again?
I certainly can. The majority of the children are in the child welfare system. Average age is about 15, 16 years old. Average number of places that they've been is around 25 to 30. Many of them have been expelled or suspended from school and can't attend public school. Almost all have experienced some type of sexual trauma.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Oliver.
Every one of your 180 children are entitled, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, to an IEP and special education services. Does the local school system for any of these 180 children pay the full amount for the services required in an IEP? Question 1. And question 2, do you think that y'all being your group, but also Ron's, are in compliance with the federal statute that requires a surrogate or an advocate for each child's IEP?
Our schools on site are SACS accredited, so we are in compliance with federal and state standards. The youth usually don't have an IEP because they need to go through the tier process, and they've been moved so many times that by the time you start the tier process at one site, they're moved to another site.
But there's no doubt in your mind that they're eligible, is there?
There's no doubt in my mind that many are eligible.
And do you get any money directly from special education federal funds that go to the DOE?
Most of the funding comes from Title I, Chapter 1, neglected and delinquent, as opposed to the
But you agree,
IDEA funds.
You agree with me that every single one of these 180 children are entitled by federal statute to an individual educational plan based on their special needs?
I believe they would all be IDEA eligible.
This conflict between DOE and DHR is a long-standing one.
Yes, ma'am.
And you just brought it to my attention one more time.
Thank you for your question.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for the services you provide. And
You're
for this
welcome.
information. Okay, next is Emily, and after Emily will be John Blend.
Good afternoon. I'm Emily Acker, CEO of Hillside, also a private provider serving children in state custody in Georgia. Wanted to, again, reiterate our need or our request for a 3% rate increase to help us cover the costs of that are actually required to care for the kids. At Hillside, we have an array of services. One of those service groups is foster care. Our foster care program is fairly small. We have 22 foster care families serving 22 children. And per our 2014 cost report, we are seeing the discrepancy between the reimbursement rate and the cost to provide care at $12.54 per day per child. When you look at every foster family that we have serving a child through DFACS, that means we have to raise over $100,000 a year just to meet actual costs. Now, by meeting actual costs, that doesn't mean that we're providing the highest quality care that we strive to provide. For example, having the adequate technology for our family consultants in the field to do their jobs effectively and efficiently costs more money. To keep the caseloads low so that our family consultants can be highly responsive to the needs of the foster care families and the children they serve drives up costs, so that exceeds actual costs. We also have the desire for our kids to participate in extracurricular activities, just like I would want for my children. Clubs after school, sports, camps, all the extra things that would help normalize their lives and bring quality to the care we provide. That exceeds that $100,000 we have to raise just to meet actual costs. And last but not least, we've heard loud and clear that the state needs more foster families. As Ron said, there are over 10,000 children in foster care, many of those children served by private providers. In response to this need, we have recently hired a full-time family recruitment specialist to go out and help us find and train more foster families to serve the children of Georgia. That's an added cost. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Does it mean that we're going to have to raise more money? Absolutely. So I am here again to ask for a 3% rate increase and to also note that as a private provider, just like many providers here, we have board of directors that represent many of the high-level and very involved companies of Georgia, as well as leveraging over 30,000 hours in volunteer work to help us provide high-quality care to the children of Georgia who need and deserve this work. Any questions?
I don't see any. Are there any questions? Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that information with us. John Blend and then Wayne Drummond.
Thank you very much. I'm 68 years old, and it's great to have a first time at something. So we will see how this goes. Madam Chair and committee, my name is John Blend, and I am the founder and chief executive of Goshen Valley Boys Ranch. I also have the honor to serve a 2-year term as president and chair of Together Georgia, who you've heard from. I also serve as chair of DHS's new Faith and Community Alliance for Region 3. My journey in child welfare began 20 years ago when Goshen was opened as a group home on our family farm in Cherokee County. Over the past 2 decades, Goshen has become home to over 200 young men. Today, we have 40 boys living on the ranch and 6 homes. Goshen is a not-for-profit, faith-based family model with youth attending public schools and local churches. We have high graduation rates. Our alumni have earned admissions to colleges, universities, and the military. DFAC's provider management audits consistently indicate Goshen has an excellent program. In 2012, Goshen opened New Beginnings, an independent living program for vulnerable young men and young women. We now have 20 young people in that program. Goshen Homes, our newly licensed child placement agency, seeks reunification of separated siblings. This past year, Goshen raised over $1 million in community grants and gifts, enhancing state reimbursements, making our growth and outcomes possible. As you've heard from my colleagues, the Goshen story, while different, is not unique. Georgia is blessed with a proven and tested private provider community. Our providers meet each day with the youth in our care. We wish them a good night. We meet the school buses. We head off to counseling and tutoring. We attend football games. We go to church services, and we stand with them at their high school graduations. We continually seek family strengthening, reunification, and adoption when needed and necessary. You'll find the private community, the private provider community, resolute in its mission. And this brings us to funding. Along with the responsibility for providing excellent care, the private provider community is responsible for managing its financial affairs. The high quality of care provided comes at a cost. State reimbursements only cover 75% of our costs. Over the past decade, as state regulations and operating costs rose steeply, the state reimbursement provided to the private provider community was effectively frozen. We know, like you on the committee know well, the state faced severe challenges and priorities were established. Your private provider community rose to the challenge of helping to keep Georgia's child welfare solvent. Priorities had to be established, we had to stay open, and we had to stay safe. Costs were evaluated and cut. We met with our boards of directors, our churches, our congregations, our communities, seeking a way forward. We asked them to step up, not step away. They responded, and it was a blessing. The circumstances made us stronger. These difficult times were shared, by the way, with our DFAC's colleagues, and we have drawn closer to them through it. The private providers are now pleased and encouraged with the governor's commitment to safety and with the adoption of the council's recommendations. Today, we are here to ask your support by signaling the private provider community that the state of Georgia recognizes the importance of the 5,000 children who are in our care and our work with them. We ask that you make support for the private provider community a priority in this session. We ask that you indicate to the private providers that a sustainable future business model is possible. We're also hopeful that you agree that the principal role of a child welfare partner should not be relentless fundraising. We believe that the private providers have demonstrated commitment and excellent stewardship, and an investment in these caregivers would be wise. We seek a 3% increase, which represents a serious resource of $6,981,000, which will provide immediate and needed services. We are very thankful for all you've done for us, for the reimbursement increase you gave us 2 years ago, and your willingness to listen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Well, you survived
you.
the first time. I hope it won't be your last. Wayne Drummond, and then Kathy Simpson.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Wayne Drummond. I have the honor of working for the Georgia Professional Human Services Association. We're a group of about 1,600 people across the state who work in or are affiliated with Public Human Services. We have a strong working relationship with the Georgia Association of DFACS Boards. I want to thank you for your support of the governor's improvement in the fiscal year 2015 budget. The Child Welfare Reform Council has come up with a very ambitious plan. I'm very fortunate to have lived long enough to be optimistic about the future of child welfare in our state. I think we have the best opportunity to do the right thing for families, for children, and for the people that do this work that we've had in several generations. And it's going to require continued focus and support in order to achieve that. The notion of fixing the salary structure, having enough staff to do the work, having vertically integrated boards, consistent practice model that doesn't change every time we have a change in leadership, focus on safety and security for staff in the field, and stabilizing the workforce are all critical. Core practice, if you're working with families and children, is to be able to develop a trusting relationship with a child who's been hurt by their family caregiver. That already puts us behind in establishing that level of trust. And whenever you have a situation where you turn over 35% or more of your workforce annually, it speaks to a need to change what we're doing on behalf of families and children. In the deliberations of the Child Welfare Reform Council, they determined that our salaries in Georgia are $11,000 below market. Georgia has the lowest entry-level salary of any of our neighboring states in child welfare. State employees have received a 1% increase in their salary since 2007. DFACS folks have been furloughed more than any other state employee and any other educator. And the turnover rate, again, is well over 35% for case managers, and we believe that it will stabilize as we continue to improve, but it's something that underscores the critical nature of the improvements that are out there. It takes about 3 months to train a new person, 6 months for them to perform optimally. It wastes millions of dollars every year if we can't provide a salary structure that allows us to retain competent, dedicated, and caring professionals. The council looked for a year, identified the most important and urgent things that can be done to fix our system of service. The things that one thing that has not been mentioned that I think is very important in the recommendations is the addition of about $5.9 million to support additional recruitment and retention of family foster care. But the career ladder is very important to be able to retain staff. That's the construct for fixing the salary structure. We believe it's the right thing to do. The council believes it's the right thing to do. We commend you, the governor, and the everyday heroes that I represent who go into communities across the state. Believe that it's the right thing to do to support these recommendations. And I encourage you to support the governor's 2016 budget. Also, having worked for a long time with our friends in the private provider community, Georgia has a robust partnership, and I would encourage you to consider supporting their needs as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you so much. Kathy Simpson, and then next will be Juliana McConnell.
Madam Chairman, committee members, my name is Kathy Simpson. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter. We strongly support the End the Wait List for home and community-based services in the requested amount of $10 million. But I want to bring it a little bit closer to home and relate that request to the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementia State Plan. You've heard about the general concerns for seniors. It's estimated that over 130,000 Georgians have Alzheimer's disease, with an anticipated increased incidence to 190,000 by 2025. And we know by research that over 50% of those who are living with the disease today have not yet been diagnosed. According to the 2012 cognitive module of the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System in Georgia, a sizable percentage, 14.7%, of adults age 45 and older are experiencing increased confusion or worsening memory problems, and we need to address this now to be better prepared for the future and for their care. More than 1 in 7 of those aged 45 and over report that they're experiencing confusion or memory loss that's happening more often or getting worse. Nearly 80% of them have not talked to a healthcare professional about it. For those with worsening memory problems, nearly 45% say it has interfered with household activities or with work or social activities. 23.6% of those with cognitive decline live alone. Some are supported by family members, others are not. Those are particularly vulnerable to delays in diagnosis, risk for injury, and inadequate nutrition. 44% of those with cognitive decline had to give up household activities or chores, and their memory problems interfered with their ability to work, volunteer, engage in social activities, or care for themselves. 53.6% report that they need assistance because of their worsening memory issues. Home and community-based services funds can help fund the independence of those living with dementia, support the caregivers, and allow family caregivers who choose to care for them in their home to do so. Bringing it on a personal note, I watched my mother and her 5 siblings place my 60-year-old grandmother at Milledgeville Hospital at a time when care for those with dementia was brutal. I watched my mother be placed in a nursing home because I could not afford to care for her at home, paying out of pocket, and I had to accept Medicaid payment for her to go into a nursing home. I also watched the lack of appropriate care for her in a nursing home because of the lack of training for those caring for individuals with dementia. I promised her that I would never put her in a nursing home, and I ended up having to do it because of her medical condition. So I urge you, please, to support the In the Wait List for home and community-based services. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Okay, and next we have Juliana and Steve. That is great. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I again appreciate the opportunity to be before you. I had the chance last year to speak before you, and your committee actually initiated the 1.5% increase that the Now and Comp waiver received. This handout we've put together is from 3 organizations, the State Providers Association for Developmental Disabilities, Georgia Association of Community Care Providers, and also the Georgia Association of Community Service Boards. As you're aware, the CSBs, or Community Service Boards, are the provider of last resort, and if no one else provides services to the IDDD population, the Community Service Boards by default become the provider. And all of these groups agree that we need another increase. Last year we were disappointed that DBHDD Commissioner did not ask for 5%. Commissioner Cook did ask for those programs directly ran by DCH for a 5% increase, which was granted. And while we certainly don't begrudge that to those folks because they certainly needed that, we would like same consideration. Unfortunately, again, the Commissioner did not ask for either an increase nor an increase in the number of placements, which may be referred to as slots to take people off of the waiting list. One of our concerns with that, and we have Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities Agreement 2 that we need an increase, is we have a very hard time philosophically continuing to take people into the system which is not adequately funded. I got into this business in 1989, which was the original waiver that was put into place by the state. And in that period of time, including the 1.5% we got that your committee initiated last year, we have had only 3 increases. As the handout points out, the CPI over this 25-year period has gone up 88.3%. Minimum wage has gone up 116%. Now, we can't even begin to hire people at minimum wage, especially in the metropolitan areas throughout the state. We hire people above minimum wage, but they still are some of the lowest paid workers in this field. And you realize what an important job they do. And we committed that we would use part of the 5% increase to fund increases for those people who do the direct care work. As you heard earlier today, there are over 7,000 people on the what they call planning lists, which in reality are simply waiting lists for services, which is discouraging. On the other hand, people that we have in service, which currently is in excess of 13,000, that is what this specific increase, which would cost the state about $8 million, but that's match money, which would pull down approximately $16 million from the federal government. So with those funds, we would be able to have the providers receive a 5% increase. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to address them. Hopefully, I know a few of you have had a chance to visit some of the facilities and programs that are run both by CSBs and by private providers, and we do appreciate that and appreciate your support.
Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see anything, but could you clarify that federal match again one more time for us? $8 million to...
It's approximately, Georgia draws down approximately 67% of Medicaid payments from the federal government. So if you put up $1 in state funds, it will pull down approximately $2 in federal funds. Now, we too would be glad to work, and we have offered this both to the commissioner to work on conversion of current state dollars, which are paid 100%, of course, with state budgeted money, to change those into matching dollars, which would in effect triple their worth. And there are many instances where we feel that could be a meaningful way to increase dollars into this service.
Okay.
Anything else?
I still don't see any questions, so thank you so very
Thank you so much.
I know the services you provide are so very important. And Juliana, you did not wish to speak, is that right? Or you're good? Okay. Paul Smith, and then Greg Richards.
Thank you for the opportunity this afternoon. I've learned standing here the last hour and a half that if you're an individual, if you're a ministry, if you're a church or a business looking for a worthy cause to support and you say you can't find one, you ought to stand in this room for about an hour and a half. I appreciate the time. I was asked to represent the Nobis Center as an employer, but I'm really here today to represent my employer. I spent 38 years with the Kroger Company. I came here in 1985 as president. We had 87 stores in the state of Georgia, and through support of the state of Georgia, local government, and a whole lot of customers, today we have 155 stores in Atlanta alone. We opened our 100th store in Atlanta in 1999. Today I want to talk to you about an important part of what has helped us be successful in that kind of an expansion. One of the things that we needed badly was people. We partnered with the Nobis Center about almost 30 years ago to train people with disabilities to work in our stores. We've placed over 1,000 people. Today we place people not only in our own stores, but with Walmart, Target, Publix, depending on where these people are located. If the training, the selection and the training that these people go through at the Nobis Center that want to go to work in our stores is incredible. Then they'll spend 8 to 12 weeks in our stores working with a Nobis trainer and our people, trying to find where they best fit within that store. And what it ends up being, some people will say, well, it's a sacrifice putting someone to work with a disability. When those people go to work in the store that they're in, they are absolutely the best at what they've done based on that selection process and based on that training. It isn't a sacrifice. We've got many people that are with us today that were with us over 20 years ago when the program was started. So these are long-term employees that are now with us. To personalize it, a couple of the people, there's Scott Cravens, who's been with us a little over 20 years. Scott's parents were told that he would never hold a job, he would never drive a car, and he would never own a home. and he now is an assistant front-end manager for us. He drives to work with his car, and at night he goes home to the condominium that he owns. We had an employee that 2 years ago, he and his father, he was the first, he was with the Doug Flutie Jr. Autistic Foundation, and he was the first one from the foundation to run in the Boston Marathon. He ran 2 years ago. He and his father finished 18 minutes before the bomb went off, and his father said when they finished, the first thing he said to his dad was, "Dad, we need to go back and help those people." Of course, they weren't able to do that. The other benefit it's been for us is these people are often people that would not be working at all and really don't have to go to work. Today, with the support for some of these people, they could sit home and take advantage of the subsidies. But today, they're tax paying. They've realized what their potential is in the world. It's an opportunity to change lives. I'll never forget the letters we would get from customers saying I was on my way home and it was Friday night and it was going to be not a good night because of the kind of day that I had. And I stopped in one of your stores and one of your special people waited on me, and I realized my day hadn't been that tough. So I just ask that you pay attention, that you listen to the needs of the Nobis Center over the next couple of years, which you've continued to support. And as a food retailer, we appreciate your business. With on our prayer list is always the snow scare, and I don't imagine there's a person in this room that hasn't been to at least one visit in a grocery store the last couple of days. Thank you very much for listening.
That's right. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see any, but thank you. I have the #1 best Kroger actually in Rome, Georgia. Just want to make sure you know that, with unbelievable employees. Okay, next up is Greg Richards, and then Denise, I believe it says Creel, I'm sorry.
Yes, my name is Greg Richards, and I work for Tommy Nobis. They have been my life for the past 6 years, and I've gone from being very, very bad to the present time. I feel like I'm on top of the world. But this is my story. The Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Services referred me to Nobis Works. Nobis Works worked with me from day one, and soon they placed me at the Housing and Urban Development Department, working in the mailroom as a clerk. From the first day, they had someone there to show me how the job was done. My professional relationships grew with the employees in the building. I caught on quickly and which improved my job day by day by meeting different people. I knew the different departments where the employees worked, so it made it easy for me to locate their packages and save them a lot of time in the mailroom. If I was not given the opportunity at first by Nobis Works, I would not be where I am right now. I am very happy with the confidence that has grown in me as well, because I can help my coworkers resolve their problems. They respect me very much, which makes me feel very good about myself. Also, I have gained the confidence in myself, which has been brought on by Nobis Works and others, to have the independence to move to my own apartment. Now I lead my own life at work and at home. Without the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, I would not be where I am today. Please fund these services to help people like myself with disabilities go on and start working. And I found it to be the best group of people that there could ever be. So thank you very much.
Well, you did so well. I don't see any questions at all, but thank you so much, Mr. Richards. Denise, and then we'll have Beth Hooks.
Thank
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here to talk to you about Easter Seals Middle Georgia and GVRA. Easter Seals Middle Georgia and GVRA's partnership began 39 years ago, excuse me. And we don't want to get to that 40 number. Everybody gets scared of that 40 number. Our services began with referrals from VR. At that time, they were called VR. We have two programs, Facility Work Adjustment and Community Work Adjustment. Over the past 3 years, we have served approximately 105 people in these programs. We have placed 21, and we've placed them at places like Kroger and Walmart and the VA and several places like that. They come to us from high school as part of their curriculum from high school, and they come to us from our 23 county service area. They go to one of our facilities. I believe the Wilkinson County students come to Dublin. The Vidalia Toombs County students go to our Eastman facility, Soperton facility, excuse me. Those children, I call them children, I'm sorry, but those students, they learn how to do a job. They learn in their facility work adjustment program. They learn what is expected of them as an employer. That prepares them to go to work in the community so that they do have a better work ethic, because they do. They really do. There's some of those that want to work. They don't want to sit at home. They want to work. And if you have a temporary layoff, trust me, they're going to be calling you, want to know when they can come back to work. Recently, Kroger store in our Dublin area, they gave a service award to one of our graduates from our community work adjustment program. He had been there 20 years, and they awarded him that recognition for 20 years of service with Kroger. Most people will tell you they can't go to Kroger. If they don't see him in one or two trips, they start asking about him and checking on him. We have the capability with VR, if there's additional VR funding. Easter Seals Middle Georgia has the capability of actually serving double what we served. We could actually serve 200. Facility work adjustment and community work adjustment. Our transitional employees, we usually serve about 163 a year at all of our facilities. And transportation, now that's a big thing. Here in Atlanta, you have MARTA, you have cabs, you have buses, you have a whole lot of things like that. In rural Georgia, you don't have anything. We furnished last year 32,109 rides. That's getting people to work and then getting them back home from work. The folks that come to work, they earn a paycheck. They spend their money locally. They're in the community. They participate in the community. They enjoy being in the community. They are not sitting at home getting subsidized. So vocational rehabilitation funding is very important. It's important because not only does it help your people, and it helps students, and it helps your constituents, and I call them my kids because usually they're way younger than I am. And you get federal funded dollars. If you don't put the money there, your federal funded dollars don't come back. I had a story about Christian and earning a paycheck, and I'm going to be just real quick with this. Christian came to us through VR, and he was in our facility work adjustment program. After his first week of work, he got his paycheck, and he came running up to the front, and he said, "Miss Denise, look at my check." And I, of course, couldn't see the check. He still had an envelope. And I said, "Christian, that's really great." I said, "What are you going to do with your money? You going to go shopping?" "No, ma'am. I'm taking my mom and dad out to eat for all that they have done for me." And I looked at him, and I'm like going, "Oh, that's so sweet." And then my next thought was, "Where are you taking them?" So he came back. He said, "I'm taking them. I'm paying for it." I asked his dad Monday when his dad brought him into work, "Did they go out to eat?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." He said, "We sure did." Said, and Christian paid for all of it with his money that he earned at Easter Seals. Thank you. Any questions?
Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you so much for the work that you do. Beth Hooks, and then Anicio Correa. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Madam Chair and Committee, my name is Beth Hooks, and I'm from Dublin, Georgia, and I'm speaking on behalf of Easter Seals of Middle Georgia. I'm a business owner and an active board member for Easter Seals. I'm here to ask the committee to please allocate funds for Easter Seals so that they can provide more jobs to those with disabilities. Organizations such as Easter Seals is a company that can provide jobs to a growing number of people with disabilities. Giving these people jobs gives them a sense of belonging and a sense of belonging, and seeing that person being able to work and just with a smile on their face just makes all the difference in the world. I've seen firsthand at Easter Seals facility the impact of what a job can do for someone with a disability. Thank you for allowing me to share, and hope that anything I have said will make a difference. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Hooks? Thank you for the great services you provide. I appreciate that. Anicio? And Dawn Randolph is next after this.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Anicio Correa, and I'm the president for programs at the Center for the Visually Impaired, a nonprofit organization here in Atlanta. We are the largest rehabilitation agency providing service to blind and visually impaired people in Georgia. Although we serve people throughout their lifespan, today I'm going to be talking to you primarily about our New View vocational rehabilitation program. CVI offer the goal of the New View rehabilitation program is to provide independence and employment for people who are blind and visually impaired. Independence, we often are asked, why should VR, vocational rehabilitation, pay for independence, service training? What does that got to do with employment? And really it has a lot to do with employment. In the case of a blind person, when they lose their vision, there are no other services available. If you lose a leg, or if you have a traumatic physical disability, you have services that are provided to you in the hospital, and even if need be, by an excellent organization and a hospital like Shepherd Center. All those services are provided via medical insurance. However, if the disability is blindness, there are no other services available but those provided by organizations like CVI with the support of vocational rehabilitation. Independence training can include things like orientation and mobility, how to get from one place to the other, how to make your own sandwich in the morning so you can go to work, or perhaps how to tell whether or not your clothes match so that you are presentable. Without those skills, for example, I might think that my tie today, I'm wearing my orange color tie. Now you can laugh now because I know it's not orange. But I know it because I have techniques that we teach that can tell me that my clothes are color coordinated even though I cannot see the colors. Those simple techniques, and some of them very complex, are those that enable a blind person to present themselves, to be prepared for work. And that's the reason I'm here, to support our partnership with vocational rehabilitation, the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, and to emphasize to you the importance of those funds to agencies like CVI. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Dawn Randolph. I'm representing the Georgia Association for Training, Employment, and Support for People with Disabilities. You know, it's always interesting when we get up here and we hear about all of the critical needs that are out there. One of the things that we think about are social services. But as the folks have talked about their rehabilitation services and their work adjustments and their work skills, some of these things, they're interconnected, whether they're providing support to a family member who can still continue to work while another family member is at work, or giving independence, which we've heard about through employment at all of the different opportunities in their community. We're talking about economic development. And I want to share some statistics with you that are quite surprising about people with disabilities that go to work in their communities. We in Georgia may put in $1 for services, and that's both, let's say, federal and state dollars. But what ends up happening is that person that goes to work ends up putting $16 back into their local community. So whether you're down in Dublin or Valdosta or Albany or up in Rome or even in Gainesville, if you have put an investment down here at the Capitol for people with those rehabilitation services, when they get to work, they're returning $16 to their community. And that's been tested by both rehab across the nation. Studies done out of several universities show the investment is very strong. And when we invest $1 in Georgia, we're actually pulling down 4 federal dollars, which is another really incredible match that many other folks won't do. And we'll keep these folks working as long as we can in the community and hopefully give them what you've heard about previously. I want to tell you about our request. We're working with vocational rehab to look at a multi-year funding formula. As you heard Executive Director Sneed talk about, we are not to our full match. We have $104 million available to Georgia. In this next year, we will only be able to pull down about $75 million. That's only 70% of what we have available. We are looking at, over the next few years, if we could fund $7.7 million in state dollars, we'd be pulling down about $28 million in federal dollars to get to that full match. And again, Director Sneed has talked about that. We'd like to work towards a several-year funding plan. This first year, if we could start moving there by investing $900,000 into the rehab to then pull down the match, which would give us $4.5 million total, that would put 1,400 Georgians here. That's a pretty amazing investment. When you think of plants that we move to Georgia, sure they have some high-paying jobs, but these are people that have now become independent. We're only talking about a $900,000 investment for $4.5 million. Think about that, let it sink in, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I believe you're going to have some questions. So, Representative Oliver.
Other than the age, the focus of the age of somebody coming out of high school in the request for funding for under the Behavioral Health Agency for employment, I don't think the services that your folks are providing are different except for age. But here's my point. I've been pressing the commissioner to use behavioral health money as the state match, as well as use technical schools as the state match. Why isn't this behavioral health money going for supportive employment usable as a state match to pull down the money?
You know, we've been asking that same question. One of the things I think that is complex about that is the federal law is requiring both rehab to hold those dollars in their budget to then pull down the match. So behavioral health or any other agency is going to have to let go of that money, have a memorandum of understanding from what I understand, and then put that money back into services for their people. That doesn't mean it would serve the folks that are talking to you today about those rehab. That's a different population.
I wanted to ask this question for the committee because it absolutely makes no sense to me that we've got 2 different state agencies with 2 different funds of state money, and they're not maximizing that. But somebody's going to have to explain that to me, and my request to the advocates is that you also press on this issue.
We have. We've pressed both the commissioner and we've pressed the executive director of state. So every conversation we get in, as Director Sneed said, there's also technical schools, Department of Education, Department of Corrections. There are other ways we could do it, but those populations would then first have to get that money. And some of these folks that presented today are not within those populations. So it's not completely the same group of people.
We've been talking about this for a year. I just want somebody to explain to me why we're not making any progress. It might not be you, but somebody might be able to explain to me.
Thank you. Representative Henson?
Just to follow up on Representative Oliver, it's really very much a silo mentality, isn't it? What we go through all the time. And we have gone through, i.e., if you put so much money into prescriptions, we're looking at the fact that if we do that, then we can reduce emergency room visits and all of that. Is that very similar to what we're doing?
You know, one of the things that is not seen behind the scenes is the Goodwills and Easter Sales and some of these providers, they all are collaborating and cooperating as private providers. They try to maximize every dollar they get. They're not silent. They're doing what they can do to get the person done.
Right.
It's that we have to go to behavioral health, and we have to go to Medicaid, and then we have to go to the rehab, and then we've got to go to the Department of Labor. It would be amazing if we had a wonderful collaboration to figure out the right way to give somebody a whole life support and not this, well, we can't serve you here, so you got to go over there. I mean, that approach is really whole life planning, and we're not there yet. It would be amazing if we can get there. And then when folks get to true retirement age for aging out of the system and they really want to retire, then the aging services may not be so foreign to them. It would be an incredible move that we could work towards somehow, someday.
I think with that I'm not asking any more questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions. Thank you so much. So Cheryl Cornett and then Pete Terwilliger, maybe? Terwilliger?
That's right.
Of course, that would be great.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and committee. We so appreciate the opportunity to talk today. My name is Cheryl Burnett. I'm Vice President of Career Services for Goodwill of North Georgia. Most people know Goodwill. They have these wonderful stores, and I'm sure where we all donated for years. But the mission side of our Goodwill is to put people to work, and we do that in a major way. I've shared just a little bit of information in front of you that will give you a sense of the sort of the magnitude of people that Goodwill puts to work every year. Last year, over 14,000 people were put to work through our Goodwill alone. We have 10 career centers that are free and open to the public and funded with foundations and our own Goodwill social enterprise. Our heart, however, is so much for the intensive side of our house, which is job training and employment and assessment services. And none more so than people with disabilities. This is where we began, and this is where our heart really is most deeply connected. Because so many of the stories that you've heard are about the people with needs, the families with needs and struggles, I thought that today we would bring a story from an employer who is going to share with you why it's important for our business community, why it's a good economic development move for us to fully fund GVRA. So it is my pleasure to introduce Pete Terwilliger with these hardware. Can you tell us your story?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. I would like to thank all of you for allowing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Candy Hardware and my fellow co-workers that are here, and about a topic that we feel is very necessary and viable. We hire, 10 years ago, we had the privilege of participating in a program that would challenge students to work in our store. Out of the group of candidates, 2 stayed and worked at the store, one physically challenged, the other autistic. I would say that the physically challenged participant received uplift to its confidence because of the program. stay with us very long because of the uplift of his confidence. He put himself out there in the marketplace and went to work for somebody else and left us. The other participant, I'm proud to say, has been an employee at Handy Hardware for the last 9 years. Excuse me. He's very good at what he does. And he's a valuable part of the team. The program has given him responsibility and value. Forgive me. Because he's tasked with getting to work on a daily basis. And it's given him value because he's a productive member of society. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. I shared a bit of statistics with you that our Goodwill, who serves, we're one of the largest Goodwills in the country, actually, and in the top 5 in so many categories. In 2012, we served over 1,600 people with disabilities. So we're the largest provider for Georgia Voc Rehab. We have this wonderful service area, which is North Georgia, that's an exciting and fertile economic environment. There are jobs, even in the worst of the economy. But you'll notice in that first chart in the upper left that in 2013, we had this shocking loss of funding available through Voc Rehab, and we shrunk our capacity to serve to well below 1,000, and are only now rebuilding it, but rebuilding it very, very cautiously and nowhere close to 1,600. Now, the impact there is that we currently have no plans to open those intensive job training and employment services, for instance, in Rome or Cartersville, although we'd planned to. We were there, and we had to shrink back. So the chart in the middle of the page gives you a sense that of those that we serve, so many are evaluation and assessment and helping, for instance, Georgians with disabilities go on to college. You know, we're helping them write a plan. But we placed almost 400 people with disabilities in FY12 and FY13. We're on target to that many people going to work in FY14. Under that percent column, you'll notice this is the retention by the employer. Now, the reason why this is important is to put those 14,000 people to work. Our Goodwill worked with 500 businesses, but over 4,000 hiring managers like Pete said, yes, I want to hire this candidate. That can't be done without the intervention and the intense services that's available through Georgia Voc Rehab. I fully support the suggestion from Gates. I am past president of the Georgia Association of Training, Employment, and Supports, and I fully support Gates' suggestion that $900,000 be added to the FY16 budget, which will serve as that $1 to pull down $4 of federal match, and that would help us put 1,400 more people to work across the state of Georgia. Do you have any questions for me?
Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see any, but thank you for
Thanks so
the
much.
good work of Goodwill, and thank you for your personal investment. Maureen Kelly. And then next will be Bob, and I believe it's Brundle Matten, maybe?
Madam Chair and members, thank you. I'm Maureen Kelly from the Atlanta Regional Commission, which is the Area Agency on Aging, and we're also a member of the Georgia Association of Area Agencies on Aging, G4A. We are requesting a $10 million investment in home and community-based services, not only because it provides timely care for older adults, nor that it upholds the spirit of Olmsted to serve people in the least restrictive setting, nor that it demonstrates that we can appropriately plan for the demographic shift that we have predicted for almost 30 years, but primarily because there is a business case to be made that it creates greater efficiencies and saves Georgia money in the long term. There are a number of compelling reasons to do this, and the numbers are too large to ignore. Per capita spending in Georgia for older adults across all aging services is currently at $16.97. That puts us at the bottom of the list across the country, 51st. And some states are spending $55 per senior. Per capita spending in Georgia for supportive services, and those are the services that actually keep people in their homes longer and out of institutional care, is currently at $4.77, again placing us 51st in the country. From 2007 to 2013, Georgia lost more than $11 million in state funds for aging services. That does not take into consideration the disproportionate share of funding cuts that Georgia suffered from sequestration and other federal Older Americans Act cuts. I'm pleased to say that Senator Isaacson and the Help Committee in Congress have proposed a reauthorization of the Older Americans Act that will mitigate some of those problems for the future, but currently we suffer from those losses. The state portion of the cost to serve older adults, as we heard earlier, in home and community-based settings is under $2,000 per year. Yet it costs the state, in the state portion, $13,200 annually to serve someone in an institution. There are currently more than 13,000 older Georgians on waiting lists. And what this says, as soon as we say they have to go onto a waiting list, is that it immediately forces them to grapple emotionally, financially, and physically with what they're going to do with no assistance and no care in their homes. And of course, they're forced immediately to consider alternative institutional care. Of that waiting list in 2014 alone, almost 500 people left the waiting list to go to a nursing home to receive care. That immediately increased the cost to Georgia unnecessarily. And if you think about it, the math is very clear. We could almost afford to fund that $10 million request in less than 2 years with the savings if we begin to address this in the settings where people want and need to be served. Against the backdrop of the unprecedented growth and the economic downturn, we have seen the funding levels not only, thank you, I'm at the end of the time, and I'm going to support that. You know the issue, $10 million will go a long way to serve people and save money in the long run.
Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you so much for the great work that you do. I appreciate it. Bob, and you can tell me how to say that name right. I will. And then Carl Lehman, maybe, is next.
Its last name is Bruder Matson. So how many of you like stories with happy endings? Yes, we all do. I'm here as a result of a happy ending. About 53 years ago, I was in the foster care system, and I was adopted. And I'm here doing some of the same work through the United Methodist Children's Home. We are in Decatur, and we have offices in Rome and Gainesville and Dalton and Augusta. And over the last 144 years, we've been creating happy endings. I'm also here as a member of the Together Georgia and as the Governor's Child Welfare Reform Council member. And I want to thank you, as many others have, and ask that you would support the bill that's been put forth around the work that we did. And I'm particularly here, though, to talk about the 3% increase for providers. So I know you've heard a lot of statistics, so I'm just going to tell you a couple of stories from our time serving children and families in Georgia. So last year, we provided more than 29,000 days of care to children in the foster care system, and that came in the form of foster care at the community level and programs for independent and transitional living for youth 18 to 21 that are still in the system. And so we pulled some numbers together, and I was trying to understand what's the burden that's been on us from a business perspective. I come with a background prior to this. I've been here for 2 years as an entrepreneur, as a business person. And so business models, you've heard that word used many times, are very important in terms of sustainability, replicating and scaling, creating happy endings. But we had about 57% of our costs funded by the state, which meant over a 6-year period of time, we funded $10.9 million. So last year, we raised about $2.1 million in 2014. That represented a 62% increase. That just about covered our costs for service. What I can tell you, though, is we cannot stand the pace that we've been at in terms of the dollars raised. Any of you that ever raised money will know that it's very hard to stand at that kind of a pace. And at the end of the day, one of the things that I think we're at risk of in the state of Georgia in terms of creating those happy endings is having enough private providers. So what's happened over the last 10 years is there's been a number, you heard statistics about the number of child caring institutions, which we are one, child placing agencies, which we are one, going out of business. And so what we've got basically is a system or a business environment where organizations that have either the ability to raise money or have some kind of financial backing can do this work. But the demand, you heard, also is ground. So there's over a 25% increase in the number of kids that came into the foster care system in about a 1-year period of time. To us, that translated into a doubling of our foster care program, as well as turning down more than 30 placements a week. Okay, so when we turn those placements down, I don't know where they go. What I can tell you is when I was in Rome about a weekend ago, I heard about everybody about the issues up there. When I'm over in Augusta, I hear about the issues. And bottom line is, and from a really place of sustainability, we can't continue to go on like this. And I worry about the day when the United Methodist Children's Home and all the other private providers will say, you know what, we cannot take any more kids. Today, we have to make very tough decisions. So whenever we take a child and we want to say yes, every time we take a child, we say, how much more money do we have to raise? So I'm asking, and I think we're all asking, could you help us, meet us part way? Because this is not sustainable. So that 3% increase needs to go higher, but this would be a really good start this year to move us in the right direction. So with that, I'll just ask if you have any questions.
Yes, Representative Henson.
I just wanted clarification. These are children that you're keeping at and housing and taking care of at your facility.
Correct. Under the state contract of room, board, and watchful oversight. In addition, we serve many other children and families that are outside of the foster care system, but I'm speaking specifically about the kids in the custody of the state.
And about how many children did you say? If you did, I didn't hear.
200 last year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I was at Rome First Methodist when you spoke.
Oh, well, good.
So thank you.
Thank you.
You so very
Appreciate
much
it.
for the work you are doing. That is my church, and I'm proud of what you are doing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Carl Lehman, and then we're going to circle back. And Dawn, if you're ready, we'll come to you. And then I know there were a couple people that were out of the room, or maybe we'll just check and make sure everybody's had a chance.
Madam Chairman, my name's Carl Lehman, and I'm the CEO of Childkind, and I'm also on the board of Together Georgia. I'm the vice president of Together Georgia, and I'm the co-chair of the Child Protective Services Advisory Committee, which is a sister review panel to the Child Fatality Review Committee. Our committee looks at child protective services. For with that hat, my committee was the, or my committee originated the workforce survey that DFACS use to analyze their workforce, and many of the recommendations from that survey went into their budget requests. So on behalf of the committee and on behalf of Childkind, I want to strongly support the funding for DFACS that's in the request. Childkind, we work with children that have very complex medical care needs and significant developmental disabilities. About half of our children, and about 75 right now, are in foster care, and we do family foster placement, and the other half of the children are with their biological families. So on behalf of the biological families, I also want to support the request for fully funding the Medicaid waivers. Those are exceedingly important, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Let me give you a real quick example of a child that we serve, and I have to change her name, but I'll call her Amy. She has developmental delay, dysphasia, heterotoxy, epilepsy, complex congenital heart defects, sinus node dysfunction, chronic respiratory failure, gastroesophageal reflux, cerebral palsy, cortical blindness. She's G-tube fed, has a pacemaker, tracheotomy with a ventilator, requires round-the-clock total care. She has a pediatric cardiologist, pulmonologist, gastrointestinal specialist, neurologist, pediatric dentist, pediatric orthopedist, and pediatric surgeon. We have about 70-some children like that, about 3/4 to 75% of the children will kind of fall somewhere within that spectrum of need. In agencies like Child Kahn, we're an RBWO provider, but over the years we've increasingly had to fund a lot of the critical services through our own fundraising. So for example, we have 3 nurses in the program that work with the foster parents. So when the child is being discharged from a pediatric hospital, then we have a nurse that will work with the staff at the hospital and the foster parent to make sure the transition goes well. Then we have nurses that can work with the foster parent over time, and then when the child goes back to their biological family, then we can help train that biological family. But a lot of that work that we fund on our own through fundraising, and a 3% increase for an agency like Child Kahn would go a long way, particularly for helping to keep our nursing services stable, so we're not constantly having to go to the community in order to raise funds for that. Now, why is this important? And I think this is what ties all of these things together. And what I've learned with a child with a disability, the one thing that I've learned over the years is you cannot make any conclusion about an individual's cognitive ability based upon their ability to communicate. And so what you see in our program is that children that will come in, that doctors might not think the child will survive very long, but when they're with a family, then the child often will improve and their health will increase. And a final point on that, and why that's important, is that it does save long-term health care costs. So we are undertaking several different studies about the kids that have been served in our program. One is through a series of pediatric hospitals. We've been comparing their use of hospital services, their inpatient days and emergency room use, before services and after services. We're doing the same with the children in foster care. We're evaluating the children after they left our programs through DFACS and soon with the Department of Community Health. So the services that a lot of agencies do provide actually do save money over the long term, and we can prove it now. But thank you very much.
Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you so much. So, Dawn, are you? Dawn, can you tell me that amount again just a minute? You said 1,000 more, and the price was, just so that I...
16 million.
Okay. Yeah, we've got it. I just wanted to make sure it went into the conversation here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you, Madam, and committee. I would first like to say my name is Priscilla Nixon. I am a representative for my brother, an advocate for my brother, Jerome Nixon. He is intellectually disabled. I have cared for him for about 5 years. I am not from Georgia. I am from Virginia. Upon my arrival to Georgia, I found out that, that the system here was a bit different. To me, there's not a lot of communication. There's a lack of communication between. And when I first came here, I had to dig and pry, really, to get some assistance with my brother, and yet I still do not have any assistance. In the time frame that we have been here, and that's a little bit over a year, my brother has experienced overwhelming amount of depression. He has experienced having hallucinations. We both have experienced a state of depression, really. And if I could say that a lot of the funding that goes to the Now and Comp would assist with anything that was needed for me as well as my brother. And caring for my brother, he would have the opportunity to be stimulated mentally, physically, throughout the day-to-day. We are stuck within a home. I am not able to go out and become a valuable asset to my community. I'm not able to work. I'm not able to do anything outside of my home. I have 2 children of my own, and it's very hard. I could sit up here and give you a lot of numbers, but the only thing that I can share with you is my personal story. And my brother, being able to have that Now and Comp waiver, it means everything. If we don't have it, it comes into play with, stories that I come in contact with parents that have ultimately killed their children in the house setting. When they go through situations, when you go through a depression state and you have a child in the home and you don't have any assistance or any type of help throughout the day or any type of stimulation, you go through a depression state. And not to give anyone the leeway for something like that, but it does cause that type of strenuous stress. And to become a valuable asset to the community, I know it would put more funding towards the community for me to become a valuable asset. I am a psych student and I would love to work. And I think that's all I have to say. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any questions? Well, thank you, and thank you for your commitment to your brother.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to circle back just a minute and see who we may have missed or called and they weren't here. Stan Jones, are you here? I know Stan was in and out. Oh, there, good.
Thank you. I was
Yes,
here with
come on.
Pat and Together Georgia, Twin Cedars.
Okay. So we've got you. Good. Great, great. Let's see. Kim Littleton. Did Kim ever step in? I don't believe Mavis Williams. Okay, great. And Nancy Paris.
She's actually on the help list.
That's what I thought. I thought it might have accidentally been on here. Is there anyone else that has something they would like to share with us? Well, I thank y'all, and I will tell to the committee, I want to thank everybody for being here, all of you in the room and all of this committee. Y'all know we're working in a very intense fashion right now, but if I'm still fortunate enough to be in this role next year, we'll try to break this down to a couple of meetings because this is a lot to absorb and your stories matter, and I'd really like to be able to give you a little more time with them for everybody to hear. I've been privileged to hear many of them in my office, and Roma has too, and individuals have, but I hope we can improve on that next year. Thank you, and this will conclude today's meeting.